What if I told you that how old you feel may not be determined only by the number on your birth certificate, but also by the way your brain and body interpret your daily habits? Neuroscientists are discovering that the brain has far more influence over the pace of aging than we once believed. In fact, your biological age, the condition of your cells, tissues, and nervous system can move faster or slower depending on the choices you make each day. That's why two people in their 60s can look and feel decades apart, one struggling with fatigue and memory lapses while the other radiates energy and clarity. Here's the good news. Aging is not just a downhill slide. Research in neuroscience and behavioral medicine shows that with the right habits, you can slow down the biological clock, preserving memory, sharpening focus, keeping muscles strong, and even protecting the brain from decline. For example, a study from Harvard Medical School found that lifestyle factors like nutrition, stress regulation, and sleep quality accounted for nearly 70% of the variation in how people aged over time. This means you have far more control over your vitality than you may realize. But here's the challenge. Our brain doesn't always cooperate. It's wired to conserve energy, to seek comfort, to fall into patterns, even when those patterns accelerate aging. That's why relying on motivation alone often fails. To truly feel 10 years younger, we need strategies that work with the brain, not against it. And that's where neuroscience becomes your ally. Over the next few minutes, I'll share 6 evidence-based tools that do exactly that. We'll explore how small, deliberate shifts in daily life, from the way you move to how you eat to the rhythms of your sleep and stress recovery, can change the chemistry of your brain and body. You'll learn how to engage neuroplasticity, the brain's remarkable ability to rewire itself, and why this may be the closest thing we have to a real anti-aging switch. So, if you've ever wondered, is it possible to feel younger, sharper, and more alive without expensive treatments or miracle pills? The answer is yes. And the path begins with understanding your brain. If there were a single habit that could slow down the aging process in both body and brain, it would be movement, not extreme workouts, not marathon training, just consistent, intentional physical activity. Neuroscience has shown again and again that movement is far more than muscle. It is medicine for the mind. When you move, especially through aerobic activity like brisk walking, cycling, or swimming, your brain releases a protein called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Think of BDNF as fertilizer for your neurons. It helps existing brain cells survive longer and encourages the growth of new ones, a process called neurogenesis. Studies show that people who exercise regularly have higher levels of BDNF and as a result perform better on memory and problem-solving tasks. This is one of the reasons older adults who stay physically active often appear sharper, more resilient, and biologically younger than their peers. But movement does more than grow new brain cells. It also improves blood flow to the hippocampus, the brain region most vulnerable to age-related decline in Alzheimer's disease. Imagine the hippocampus as your mental GPS. It helps you remember where you put your keys, recognize faces, and navigate conversations. Regular movement keeps that GPS online. In fact, MRI studies have shown that exercise can actually increase the size of the hippocampus even in people over 60. And here's another insight. Exercise improves the balance of neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin. These chemicals regulate mood, motivation, and focus. This means that every time you take a walk, you're not just strengthening your heart, you're recalibrating your brain's chemistry in a way that protects against depression and cognitive decline. Now, some people hear exercise and imagine hours at the gym. That's not what the research suggests. The biggest benefits often come from achievable, consistent habits. Even 20-30 minutes of brisk walking 5 days a week has been linked with slower cellular aging and improved brain health. What matters most is not intensity, but regularity. Here's a simple protocol you can try. Movement snacks. Break up long periods of sitting with 2-3 minutes of walking, stretching, or light bodyweight activity every half hour. This doesn't just burn calories, it keeps blood sugar stable, reduces inflammation, and re-energizes the brain. Ask yourself, have you ever noticed how your thinking becomes foggy after sitting for too long? That's your brain signaling that it needs circulation. A short walk can reset that system in minutes. For those who enjoy structure, blending aerobic activity with strength training is ideal. Strength training in particular stimulates hormones like IGF-1 that not only build muscle but also promote brain health. Think of lifting weights or resistance bands as investing not just in stronger legs and arms, but in sharper focus and memory. One final layer, movement is also an emotional regulator. When you exercise, your brain's stress circuits, especially the amygdala, quiet down, while your prefrontal cortex, the region of rational decision-making, gains more control. This means fewer overreactions, less anxiety, and more emotional stability. In other words, moving your body literally helps you age emotionally with more grace. So the takeaway is simple. If you want to feel 10 years younger, start with the most accessible tool you already have, your body in motion. Don't wait for perfect conditions. Begin where you are. Walk around the block, stretch in your living room, dance to your favorite song. Every step you take is a signal to your brain. We are alive, we are adapting, we are staying young. We often think of food in terms of weight, appearance, or energy, but here's a truth that neuroscience makes very clear. Every bite you take is a message to your brain. It tells your neurons whether to thrive, repair, or decline. This is why nutrition isn't just about avoiding disease. It's one of the most powerful levers for slowing down aging and feeling younger. One of the central culprits in accelerated aging is inflammation, chronic, low-grade inflammation, sometimes called inflammaging, damages brain cells, shortens telomeres, the protective caps on DNA that determine cellular lifespan, and impairs the body's ability to repair itself. What drives this? Diets heavy in processed foods, refined sugars, and unhealthy fats. But here's the hopeful side. The right foods don't just reduce damage, they actively build resilience. Let's start with omega-3 fatty acids found in foods like fatty fish, walnuts, and flax seeds. These are the raw materials your brain uses to build and repair cell membranes. Without them, neurons struggle to communicate efficiently. People with higher omega-3 intake consistently show slower rates of cognitive decline. Think of omega-3 ces as oil for the brain's machinery. They keep signals running smoothly, protecting memory and focus as you age. Next are polyphenols and antioxidants, abundant in berries, dark leafy greens, and even a modest amount of dark chocolate. These compounds neutralize free radicals, which are unstable molecules that damage cells over time. Free radicals are like sparks flying off a campfire. A few are fine, but unchecked, they can burn the whole forest. Antioxidants act like a protective shield, keeping those sparks from spreading. Research has shown that diets rich in polyphenols can improve blood flow to the brain, enhance learning, and support mood regulation. Then there's glucose control. The brain runs primarily on glucose, but it's incredibly sensitive to swings in blood sugar. When we flood the body with refined carbs and sugars, insulin spikes, and the brain's delicate chemistry becomes unstable. That's why people often feel foggy or irritable after a sugar crash. On the other hand, steady blood sugar supported by whole grains, legumes, vegetables, and balanced protein keeps the brain sharp and energy stable throughout the day. A simple framework you can use is the brain plate. Imagine filling half your plate with colorful vegetables and greens, 1/4 with lean protein or legumes, and 1/4 with healthy fats or whole grains. This isn't just a nutrition rule of thumb, it's a neurological investment plan. You're feeding your mitochondria, the cell's energy engines, calming inflammation, and giving your neurons the raw materials they need to regenerate. Hydration matters too. Even mild dehydration, just 1–2% of body weight lost in water, can impair memory and mood. Many people mistake fatigue or irritability for aging when in fact it's simply the brain running low on hydration. Keeping a glass of water nearby and drinking consistently throughout the day is one of the simplest anti-aging habits you can adopt. Now, here's where behavior comes in. The brain often craves quick energy, which is why sugary snacks are tempting. But you can train your brain to crave differently by pairing healthier foods with positive rituals. For example, if you enjoy a square of dark chocolate, pair it with green tea in the afternoon. Over time, your brain associates that ritual with calm focus rather than a sugar high. So the question is, are you eating for your stomach or are you eating for your neurons? Every meal is an opportunity to reduce inflammation, fuel plasticity, and literally shape how young your brain feels. And if this insight is resonating with you, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. We explore more science-based tools like this every week so you can take control of your health and keep your brain thriving at any age. If there is one natural, non-negotiable medicine for slowing down aging, it is sleep. Not the quick nap, not just resting your eyes, but deep, restorative sleep that allows your brain and body to reset on a cellular level. Neuroscience has revealed that sleep is far more than rest, it is active repair. When you sleep, especially in slow wave and REM stages, your brain performs what scientists call glymphatic clearance. Imagine the brain as a busy city. During the day, traffic is heavy, thoughts, emotions, sensory inputs all moving at once. At night, during deep sleep, it's as if street sweepers come through and wash away the metabolic waste that accumulates between neurons, including toxic proteins linked to Alzheimer's disease. Without sufficient sleep, this cleanup system stalls, and over time, the brain ages faster. But sleep is not just about cleaning, it is also about consolidation. When you learn something new during the day, whether it's a name, a skill, or even an emotional lesson, your brain encodes it. Yet that memory is fragile until it is replayed and stored during sleep. In fact, sleep is like pressing the save button on your daily experiences. Without it, the hippocampus, your brain's memory hub, becomes overloaded and new learning can't stick. That's why chronic poor sleep is often one of the earliest predictors of cognitive decline. So how do we use this knowledge to feel younger? One key is consistency. The brain loves rhythm. Going to bed and waking up at the same time each day strengthens your circadian rhythm, the internal clock that governs not just sleep, but hormones, digestion, and even mood. When this rhythm is disrupted by late nights, irregular schedules, or blue light exposure before bed, the aging process accelerates at a cellular level. Another tool is protecting melatonin, the hormone that signals your body it's time to sleep. Melatonin is suppressed by artificial light, especially the blue light from phones and tablets. If you've ever noticed that scrolling at night leaves you restless or wired, that's your melatonin being disrupted. A simple adjustment: dim lights in the evening, avoid screens for at least 30-60 minutes before bed, and if possible, expose yourself to natural light in the morning to anchor your rhythm. Temperature also plays a role. The brain cools by about 1 degree Celsius at night to enter deep sleep. Creating a cooler sleep environment around 65 to 67 degrees Fahrenheit signals to the body it's time to shut down. Small adjustments like breathable bedding or a fan can make a remarkable difference. And then there's stress. Elevated cortisol, the stress hormone, is a major sleep disruptor. Simple protocols like slow breathing, meditation, or journaling before bed calm the nervous system and allow sleep to arrive naturally. You don't need hours. Even 5 minutes of intentional winding down can reset the brain from high alert to rest mode. Ask yourself this: when was the last time you woke up truly refreshed, without an alarm, without grogginess? That feeling is not just luck, it's the outcome of aligning your habits with your biology. Sleep is not a luxury. It is the foundation that determines how well your brain functions, how stable your mood feels, and how resilient your body remains against aging. So if you want to feel 10 years younger, guard your sleep like a precious resource, because in many ways it is each night you invest in deep restorative rest, you're telling your brain, repair, rebuild, and renew. If there's one invisible force that can speed up aging more than almost anything else, it's chronic stress. Stress in short bursts can be useful. It sharpens focus, mobilizes energy, and helps us rise to challenges. But when stress becomes constant, when the nervous system is stuck in on mode, the cost is profound. It accelerates cellular wear and tear, weakens immunity, and even shortens telomeres, the protective caps on DNA that determine how long cells live. From a neuroscience perspective, chronic stress hijacks the brain. The amygdala, the region responsible for threat detection, becomes overactive, constantly scanning for danger. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that regulates emotions, makes decisions, and keeps impulses in check, weakens. This imbalance doesn't just make us feel anxious, it changes our biology in a way that ages us from the inside out. Here's the empowering part. We can train the nervous system back into balance. Just as exercise builds muscle, certain practices strengthen the prefrontal cortex and calm the amygdala, restoring resilience. One of the most direct tools is controlled breathing, slow, deep breathing, about 5 to 6 breaths per minute, activates the vagus nerve, shifting the body into parasympathetic mode, sometimes called rest and digest. This lowers heart rate, reduces blood pressure, and signals to the brain that it is safe. If you've ever noticed how sighing or exhaling slowly calms you down, that's your nervous system hitting reset. Another tool is reframing. Neuroscience shows that the way we interpret stress changes its biological impact. For example, viewing a racing heart before a big presentation as my body preparing me rather than I'm failing reduces cortisol and boosts performance. This is called cognitive reappraisal, and practicing it not only lowers stress in the moment, but strengthens neural pathways that promote resilience over time. Physical activity also plays a role here. Exercise reduces baseline cortisol levels and rewires the stress response system. It doesn't eliminate challenges, but it changes how intensely the body reacts. That's why people who move regularly often report being calmer under pressure. And then there's the power of recovery rituals. Stress is inevitable, but recovery is a choice. Simple practices like journaling, spending time in nature, or even short mindfulness sessions train the nervous system to toggle between activation and rest. Think of it as giving your brain interval training, stress, then release, stress, then release. Over time, this rhythm keeps the system flexible and youthful. Now, a personal question. Do you carry stress in your body? Maybe tight shoulders, clenched jaws, shallow breathing. These are physical signs of an overworked nervous system. Paying attention to those cues and responding with a reset, even a single deep breath, is how you take back control moment to moment. Here's a practical protocol. Whenever you notice tension building, pause and try a physiological sigh. Inhale deeply through the nose, take a second short sip of air, then exhale slowly through the mouth. Just 2 or 3 rounds can lower stress markers in the body and bring the brain back to balance. The truth is, aging is not just about years passing. It's about how well your body recovers from stress. If you can teach your nervous system to reset quickly, you give your brain and cells the signal to preserve energy, repair damage, and stay youthful. And if insights like these are helpful, consider subscribing and joining this community. Each week we explore science-driven tools you can use to strengthen your brain, protect your body, and live not just longer, but better. When we think about aging well, most of us focus on diet, exercise, or sleep. But neuroscience reveals something surprising. One of the strongest predictors of how long you live and how young you feel is the quality of your relationships. In fact, long-term studies have shown that people with strong social bonds live longer, recover faster from illness, and maintain sharper cognitive function compared to those who are isolated. Why? Because connection isn't just emotional, it's biological. When you spend time with people you trust and feel supported by, your brain releases oxytocin, sometimes called the bonding hormone. Oxytocin lowers cortisol, the stress hormone, and strengthens the parasympathetic nervous system. This creates a calming effect that protects your heart, reduces inflammation, and even slows cellular aging. On the other hand, loneliness and chronic social stress activate the same neural pathways as physical pain. The amygdala lights up, cortisol rises, and the body shifts into survival mode. Over time, this constant state of alertness wears down the immune system and accelerates decline. That's why loneliness in older adults is considered as risky for health as smoking or obesity. But here's the empowering part. Connection doesn't have to mean having a large social circle. What matters most is the depth of the bond, not the number of contacts. Even 1 or 2 emotionally secure relationships can buffer the nervous system against the wear and tear of aging. Think of social connection as exercise for the brain. Every time you share a laugh, offer kindness, or have a meaningful conversation, neural circuits in the prefrontal cortex and limbic system strengthen. These are the same regions that regulate memory, emotional control, and decision-making. In other words, nurturing relationships is like lifting weights for your brain's longevity. So how can you apply this practically? Start small. Schedule regular time, even 10 minutes, to connect with someone you care about. This could be a phone call, a walk with a friend, or dinner with family. Research shows that even micro moments of positive connection, like making eye contact or expressing gratitude, are enough to shift brain chemistry toward resilience. Another tool is emotional openness. When you suppress emotions, your body holds on to stress, but when you share authentically with someone you trust, the brain perceives safety. This activates the prefrontal cortex, reduces amygdala overdrive, and helps regulate the nervous system. That's why talking through worries with a trusted friend often feels like a weight being lifted. If you're wondering, but what if my social circle is small? Remember, connection can be cultivated. Volunteering, joining interest groups, or even practicing kindness with strangers can stimulate the same brain pathways. The act of giving, holding the door for someone, offering a compliment, releases oxytocin and reminds the brain it's part of a larger human fabric. So the question is, who in your life gives you energy, support, and perspective? And just as important, who do you show up for? Relationships are a two-way flow, and the act of giving connection is just as restorative as receiving it. To feel 10 years younger, strengthen not only your body, but your bonds. Because in the end, it's not just neurons that keep us alive, it's the network between them and between us. One of the most exciting discoveries in neuroscience over the past few decades is that the brain is not fixed. For a long time, scientists believed that once we reached adulthood, the brain simply declined, losing neurons, losing capacity. But research into neuroplasticity has completely rewritten that story. The brain has the ability to adapt, reorganize, and grow new connections throughout life. And one of the best ways to keep it young is to continuously challenge it with novelty and learning. Here's why this matters. As we age, the brain naturally becomes more efficient, relying on established routines and well-worn neural pathways. That efficiency is useful. It's why we can drive familiar roads without thinking. But the downside is that efficiency reduces stimulation. Without new challenges, the brain stops building fresh connections, and that accelerates cognitive decline. Novelty acts like a spark. When you try something new, whether it's learning a language, picking up an instrument, or even taking a new route on your daily walk, your brain releases dopamine. Dopamine is not just the reward chemical, it's also a signal for plasticity. It tells the brain, pay attention, this matters, strengthen these circuits. That's why new experiences feel energizing and why they can make you feel younger, more alive, and more engaged with the world. Now, novelty doesn't have to mean dramatic life changes. Even small doses are powerful. Reading a different type of book, cooking a new recipe, or practicing a new skill challenges the brain to stretch. Think of it like cross-training for the mind. Just as your muscles grow when they encounter resistance, your neurons grow when they encounter the unfamiliar. Another powerful tool is lifelong learning. Research consistently shows that people who continue to study, create, or explore into later decades maintain sharper memory and slower rates of decline. This is partly because learning strengthens the prefrontal cortex and hippocampus, the very regions most vulnerable to aging. It's like giving those areas regular workouts so they don't shrink from disuse. Ask yourself, when was the last time you did something for the first time? That question alone can open doors. Doesn't matter whether it's artistic, intellectual, or physical. What matters is that the activity nudges your brain out of autopilot. Here's a simple protocol. Aim for at least one small act of novelty each day. It could be brushing your teeth with your non-dominant hand, taking a new walking route, or learning a new word in a foreign language. These micro-challenges may seem trivial, but they engage new neural circuits. Over weeks and months, these circuits accumulate into greater cognitive reserve, the brain's ability to adapt and resist decline. It's also worth noting that curiosity itself is protective. When you approach life with curiosity, the brain remains flexible, open, and ready to adapt. This mindset not only stimulates learning, but also reduces stress because curiosity reframes uncertainty as opportunity rather than threat. So the takeaway is simple. To feel younger, don't just protect the brain, challenge it. Seek out novelty, embrace learning, and keep curiosity alive. Because youth is not just measured in years, but in the brain's willingness to grow. So let's step back and reflect on what we've uncovered. Aging is not simply a matter of counting candles on a birthday cake. Neuroscience shows us that the pace of aging is profoundly shaped by how we live, by the signals we send to our brain and body each day, and that means we have more influence than we once believed. We explored 6 science-backed ways to feel younger, sharper, and more alive. First, we saw how movement is medicine for the mind, increasing blood flow, stimulating neurogenesis, and recalibrating mood chemistry. Second, we learned that nutrition is not just about calories, but about fueling neurons, calming inflammation, and building resilience at the cellular level. Third, we uncovered the extraordinary power of restorative sleep, the nightly reset that detoxifies the brain and protects memory. Fourth, we understood how regulating stress keeps the nervous system flexible and prevents the corrosive effects of cortisol on body and brain. Fifth, we discovered that meaningful relationships are not just emotionally comforting, but biologically protective, shielding the nervous system from decline. And finally, we revealed that novelty and lifelong learning keep the brain adaptable, young, and curious. These 6 practices are not random tips together. They form a kind of blueprint for slowing biological aging. They give us leverage over the brain's plasticity, its chemistry, and its resilience. And the beautiful truth is that they are accessible. You don't need expensive treatments, miracle pills, or elaborate systems. You need intentional choices, practiced consistently. Now here's the deeper question, why does this matter? Because aging gracefully isn't just about extending years. It's about the quality of those years. Imagine waking up with more clarity, more energy, and more emotional steadiness. Imagine being able to keep learning, keep contributing, keep connecting deeply with the people you love. That's what slowing aging really gives you, more life in your years. Of course, change is not always easy. The brain prefers routine, and comfort often feels safer than growth. But remember, every small step counts. One short walk, one healthier meal, one night of prioritized sleep, one conversation with someone you love, one new skill or curiosity followed. Each act may feel small in isolation, but together they compound into momentum. This is how aging slows, not in giant leaps, but in the quiet consistency of daily choices. So here is my invitation to you. Choose just one of these tools and begin today. Maybe tonight you set your phone aside an hour earlier and prepare your mind for deeper sleep. Maybe tomorrow you take a walk outside and notice how your brain feels afterward. Or maybe you call a friend you've been meaning to reconnect with. Whatever you choose, let that action be a message to your brain. We are still growing, still learning, still alive. If this message resonates with you, I encourage you to join this community by liking, commenting, and subscribing. Not just as a click of support, but as a commitment to your own journey of staying vibrant and strong. Each week we'll continue exploring practical, science-based tools to help you feel not just younger, but more fully yourself. Remember this, aging is inevitable, but how you age is influenceable. You are not at the mercy of time. You have tools backed by neuroscience to reclaim energy, protect your mind, and live with purpose. So take that step today. Your future self, 10 years younger, more vibrant, and more alive, will thank you.